Good evening, everyone. It's 7:30, and I'd like to call our January 21st meeting to order. Laura, would you please take us through our roll call?
Sure, and I apologize in advance if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Tara Figueroa?
Yes.
Okay, Jonathan Trapp?
Present.
Lincoln Johnson?
Present.
Sue Neal?
Present.
Ashley Pascarella?
Present.
Melissa Usaglia?
Present.
Amanda Wagner?
Here.
Dan Wisniewski?
Present.
And I think that's everyone?
It is. We also have attorney Jim Cordone joining us tonight.
Hello.
Excellent. So we've got a quorum, and we can move to public comment. Before we do, as usual, I'd like to quickly review a couple of housekeeping notes. First, all members of the community are welcome to speak on topics that relate to our mission, and we ask that you please keep your time to 2 minutes. You can just go ahead if you'd like to speak, just use the raise hand function on the Zoom panel, or if you're joining us via audio tonight, hit *9. Okay, seeing no comments.
There's one. It's coming in, Miss Ellers.
Oh, excellent.
One second.
No worries. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, am I unmuted? I think so.
You are. We can hear you. If you could just please state your name and your address.
Sure, absolutely. I am Christine L. Eris, and I live at 4955 Madison Avenue. And I just wanted to share and amplify one suggestion, which I've seen talked about a bit on social media, and I did write you all and send an email last week to this effect, but I wanted to just mention it here this evening if I could, which is there's been some suggestions by folks in the community, not me, it's not my original idea, but I support it wholeheartedly, is that it would be really wonderful if Edit could work alongside some other folks in the community who are interested in exploring the idea of finding some additional way to memorialize a historical figure in town who was a former enslaved person by the name of Nero Hawley. A lot of people are familiar with his story, but not enough people are familiar with his story. And there is an exhibit to him on permanent display at the Trumbull Historical Society, as well as his former home has a placard on it. But a lot of folks think that it would be really great to have a memorial in town, another way to amplify his story. He was an enslaved person who belonged to the Mallet family and then was sold, or inherited or given in inheritance to the Hawley family, which is how he got that name. And he fought in the Revolutionary War and then was a freed person and then worked as a brick maker in town. So I think that there's something there that I think, it certainly wouldn't be work that you would do entirely on your own, but I think there are enough folks in the community who would get on board with this concept, and it could be something that could be worked on together. And while it doesn't, make some ongoing change or anything to that nature, it does sort of amplify something in history that needs to be shared further, I believe. So that's it. That was what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Christine. We really appreciate you joining us tonight and sharing that suggestion. Certainly Nero did live an extraordinary and fascinating life, and continue to explore that as one of our initiatives.
Thanks for letting me share that today. Thanks.
Okay, if there are no other comments, We have our next agenda item, which is to approve, we have two sets of meeting minutes to approve. So the first is for the December 17th, 2020 meeting minutes, which were circulated in our agenda attached to page 2. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Yes, Jonathan Trupp?
I move the approval of the minutes of our meeting of December 17th, 2020 as presented.
A second.
Excellent. So it has been moved by Vice Chair Trott to approve the December 17th, 2020 minutes as distributed and seconded by Sue Neal. I think unless there are any objections, by a raise of hand, could you please indicate that you are in support? And we can go ahead and, excellent. Okay, if you could please let the record show that we unanimously approve the December 17th minutes. We also have the minutes that were from last week's public hearing, and those were attached on page 12 of the agenda for tonight. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes? Or are there any?
I make a
Thank you,
motion
Link.
to approve the minutes.
To approve the minutes? Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, awesome. So we've got a motion on the floor by Lincoln Johnson to approve the minutes as circulated for our January 14th public hearing, seconded by Ashley Pascarella. Can we, by a show of hands, just show that we're all in
Can I
favor?
comment on those minutes briefly?
Please.
I don't know that necessarily we need to revise the minutes in any respect, but I did note that the word affected, I believe was, or I think it was affected, was misspelled as affected, which matters primarily because it was in an acronym that has an E, so it stood out. I also wanted to note, I failed to do it on the meeting last week. I did make a quick comment about a speaker being near and dear to me, but I think it probably is appropriate to disclose that Gabby Tropp, who spoke, was my daughter. So again, I don't know that we need to modify the minutes, but I did want to be clear about that.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. If there is a motion to revise the minutes with the edits that Jonathan has just shared, would someone like to put that on the floor? Or if we feel that we can go ahead and approve as they were distributed, then Lincoln's motion is still on the floor, so.
I'll move to be able to make an edit to the minutes from the public hearing.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, so it has been moved by Amanda Wagner to make a couple of minor tweaks to the public hearing minutes on January 14th. One, to correct the spelling of the comments from affected to effected. And the second, to strike, or was it to strike or to add the fact that Gabby Tropp is, did you want to add that piece in, Jonathan, to clarify?
I think if folks think it appropriate, I would add the disclosure that Gabby Tropp is my daughter.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so two edits to the minutes on January 14th. One, the spelling correction, and the second, to disclose Gabby Tropp as Jonathan Tropp's daughter. And it's been seconded by Stan Wisniewski. So if everyone is comfortable with moving forward with these changes, by a show of hands, could you just raise? Okay, and we can go ahead and approve the minutes as edited. Perfect. The next bullet on our agenda tonight is a communications update. So just as a reminder, this is an opportunity for our secretary, Amanda Wagner, to share any communications that we receive through EDIT's inbox, which is edit@trumbull-ct.gov. So Amanda, are there any communication updates that you'd like to share tonight?
I'm going to read Christine's fully because Christine was able to pop on tonight and share her view with us. But there was a piece in there that she didn't mention tonight that I thought should be noted amongst all of us. Was she talked a little bit about like a coalition or a committee where EDIT can help participate in to lobby for a site on town property and to find like an artist to help raise work to be able to do some kind of like diversity art amongst ourselves. And so she mentioned it there as well. She knows that there's definitely some volunteers with the Trumbull Historical Society that would be eager participants. So she wanted to note that. We also had another person email us with a couple of a little bit of feedback from for the public hearing, but unfortunately they were unable to make it. I'm going to read the whole thing because I want to make sure that I'm putting things into this person's words. And it's in our edit email address. Hello, distinguished members of this task force. First off, thank you so much for your willingness to step up and take on this important moment of cultural clarity in our town and, parentheses, let's hope, across our country. I'm disappointed that I cannot attend tonight's meeting in person, and I have much to say on the topic of celebrating diversity. Maybe for me, that's another day. I just had a few pieces of sadly negative feedback about two things I've been displeased about in our school district. There are many others, but I'm trying to keep it short. One, I received a new school calendar 2020 to 2021 yesterday. This was on, by the way, the 14th. And on it, October 12th is still referred to as Columbus Day. I like celebrating diverse culture, but I believe the holiday, if it's a day off or a day on, should be rebranded. She put a suggestion of Italian Heritage Day. However that looks, that holiday would set better with me that way. I personally must add, let's let people of Italian culture decide how that might look, or whatever we decide to change it. Two, I have heard, and this might be a rumor, but I believe a friend who told me in great detail that Middlebrook has some end of year ceremony with a younger grade. She believes it's kindergarten or first grade, involving a heteronormative version of marriage. I'm in one of those. I love my wedding day, but to impose marriage, parentheses, in old but sacred and used to be exclusively just men and women allowed to do this with one another on little children is not good in my opinion. What if some can't already see themselves wanting to wear a tux or a white gown? That plants a doubt and shame on them, and far too soon, if I'm going to be honest. The way to turn that one around is to like make it a birthday celebration instead of a marriage celebration. Everyone has one of those. Everyone loves at least a prize or a cake or a present. Let the birthday person decide their own birthday, something like that. Essentially, the biggest problem there is that the wedding thing is a little challenging. So those are the two emails that I received in our edit email specifically, but then I also got one for that I think is important. And I'm going to share my screen quickly.
I'm not sure if it's just me, but Amanda, I think your audio is cutting out just a little bit. I heard you for most of the last, now I'm having a hard time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Are you hearing me now? Okay.
Very lightly though, barely.
I can't really change my audio. What about now? Is this a little bit better?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay, I have to talk directly in the middle of my screen. But I wanted to share this with you all because I think that it's extremely important. I know that we're all in a committee right now, but I'm hoping that if anyone's reading through our minutes or if they're popping on tonight to kind of see what we're talking about, this is a really interesting email that I got from the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. I was a part of Representation Matters, and it's a 2-day training. It's free, and it's helping for people of color to learn fundamentals and like the elements behind running for office. So if anyone has a spark or an interest in politics, you don't really know where to start, which I would raise my hand in that category, I highly recommend going to this 2-day training. You'll see below that the outline of it is really talking to a variety of panelists. And they shared a couple of folks in this email here that I think is just really fantastic. When you register, you'll get a full agenda of those 2 days would look like. And it is all virtual, I believe, from what I was gathering. So I think that it would be a really great idea to kind of promote this amongst our town. I'm going to try to see if I can get some kind of snapshot of this to post up into our Facebook group to kind of highlight a little bit more and see if other folks would be willing to share this around, because if you're interested in politics, you might not know where to start, and this could be a really great avenue for folks. So I wanted to share this with you all today. And I believe those are the 3 key pieces that I had to share for communications.
Excellent. I will note that we did share that training on Facebook, but we should continue to promote that definitely, especially as we approach the date there. Okay. So the next piece on our agenda is for an update on our edit logo competition. So can I turn it over to you, Ashley?
You can. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So I've made a very basic part of the flyer, but I wanted some input from the committee and just to see what you think. So hold on, let me share my screen really fast. Hold on. Maybe I will. There we go. Okay, so can you see this? There we go. All right, so this is, I used the background that we have on the Facebook page because I was kind of like, well, we don't want to add a lot because the little question mark is going to be the logo. And I was thinking of putting some type in there, but I'll go over the rest with you in the meantime. So what I have now is the new Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Task Force edit needs a logo. During the month of February, which we can change or agree upon, we invite all members of the community to tap into their artistic side to create a logo which represents what edit means to them and the community. And on the right, I have the mission statement, which I think needs to be on there so people can, if they're not familiar or if they want to look more into it, they can have that. So the questions I have, which I would like to get some input. So should we vote or should we make it a public vote for the logo? What seems to be like, anybody have any ideas? What would be best?
I'm feeling maybe the public should vote on it.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't have any difficulty with the public qualifying the top 3 or something like that. I have some reluctance to say that the public will decide, because that's how you end up with very strange things that you're not.
True.
Very good point, Jonathan.
Well, yeah, and I was concerned that we might not have anybody, because we're so new, we might not have enough feedback to really, make a decision. Okay. And then, we post the top 3 entries. So I was thinking we could post it on the Facebook page, on the website, just so we, so it's not just one thing and people can see like a couple of different entries. And then also, once the flyer is approved, we could send to the schools, especially the art classes, to showcase. I think that we should showcase the children's entries in total on the website and the Facebook page, because I think that would be an awesome way for kids to become involved and maybe be a little bit more aware of the task force. And you guys agree with that?
If we're going to have the public vote, then presumably you want to put all entries subject to a right of veto up.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even after the fact, like I think that maybe showcasing the kids' entries, because we don't have the library for people to go to, and that's where a lot of the art projects are presented. So maybe we could show what they came up with on like a special, online exhibit or something.
Make it an album.
Yeah.
So technically, like, we could do what Jonathan's saying, is showcasing all of them, and we just don't get rid of them and be like, this is what our town has presented. And like underneath each photo, we can be like, Peyton Wagner, 4 years old, like whatever.
Yeah. No, yeah. That's what I was thinking. Okay, good. And then this is a question for Jim. Do we need legal approval to use someone's artwork for the logo? So I think this came up before and I don't have my notes on it right at this second, but if we're going to make this competition, then, the public votes on it and we vote on the, the last 3 or whatever we decide. narrow it down, do we have to copyright or something the logo? Is that a legal issue?
I think what we could do is just have folks, when they apply, consent, maybe a sentence in there when they submit it, that they're consenting to the commission to be able to use it
Okay.
for the purposes of the commission. I think that would be sufficient.
So,
So if I may, I think that all entrants should, by virtue of submitting their entry, assign intellectual property rights to the town of Trumbull.
so I'm not a lawyer and I know you two are. So how would we go about doing that, writing it up? Is it a basic thing that we could find, or?
Kind of a standard, contest thing for anything that involves artwork. Should be a fairly simple thing to do.
Okay.
Or maybe it's once they, because I guess we have to think a little bit about the process. So for one, like, how are we actually, what is the medium or the criteria that we're asking people? So do we want them to submit a logo that's designed on the computer, or are they sending it like as a JPEG, or is this something that can be hand-drawn that we would then take an impression of? So whatever that piece is, then once we would ask them to email it to us, and maybe an automatic reply is, thank you, we've received your entry, you know, we're going to be going through, like, we'll review it, and just like, please note, as you are formally now entering, you know, these are sort of the consents that you're giving for us to be able to distribute, you know, display, that sort of thing.
Sure. I think with that, my opinion is, because of COVID, I think everything has to be JPEG or, you know, something online, because we can't physically do that at this time. But does anybody, I mean, I cannot do that because I'm not legally trained, obviously, but would that be something that somebody could help me with, or we could maybe talk this week about?
I'm quite confident that we can help you do that.
Thanks.
And I think that I would not do it in the form of a reply. I would want there to be an affirmative acknowledgement, as opposed to the possibility of someone arguing that they ignored something we sent.
Yeah, I'll be happy to work with you and Jonathan too on making sure that we have the proper language in there for the application. So when they submit it, they are affirmatively authorizing us to use their image for the purposes of edit, and as Jonathan said, to assign any rights to us for that use.
Right. I'm sure it is pretty basic. I mean, with releases and whatnot. So do we want to try to do this for February 1st, or do we need to, can we do that, you know, can we work together to agree that this is the format that we want and we have to make an application? Does that make sense?
Ashley, if you're asking if I think that February 1st to the 28th is a good time frame, I think that's great to just do it like for the month of February.
Cool.
I just don't know whether or not you need any more time to get anything together before then.
I think all we need now is just the application and for that clearance, right? I mean, I think that we're pretty set on the parameters, and then once we have it, I can send it out and we can give it to whatever groups that we want to give it to. I mean, any group basically in the public.
What do you contemplate for an application?
Well, kind of what Jim just said, just fill out your name, you know, name, age, email, address, and that could be the basic thing. And then they would have to sign something that would be equivalent to like a release, right?
Do you want some sort of description of what we're looking for in the logo? Maybe that should go in the application, and, you know, the format, a JPEG or whatever they have to submit.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we could do JPEG, right? That would be the easiest. I mean, I don't want to describe what we want because I want it to be kind of what people perceive it as. I know that sounds dreamy, but is that enough? And if I'm wrong, I mean, please let me know. I have not done this specifically before, but I know legality is important.
What if
I would think a PDF would work as well.
Yeah. So basically a file, they can send us a file. And but I guess the question too would be, would they send it to the basic email, like the overall email, or should we create a separate email for the logo contest?
I would just say to use the edit one.
Okay.
We're not getting flooded, so I think we'd be okay.
Right.
Hey, could we all actually like host? Would it be easy to host since it's an application form, like host it on like a Google Doc or like one of these online survey things where we could like easily have them fill it out and attach it, or would that complicate things?
I think you want the information to accompany the submission. And so I would imagine our instructions will be send your submission by email with a PDF or JPEG attachment with your name, email address, and whatever we're calling it, authorization or assignment.
But we could just have like a one-page application which
Yeah.
has the name, their information, and on the bottom of it, Jonathan, we can work on the language for the assignment consent, and then they can
Yeah.
sign that and they submit that along with their artwork.
Yeah, I think that we should definitely make it as easy as possible. And like, I know the language is going to be important, but I feel like again, I'm saying release because that's what I'm used to, but a basic releasing, the intellectual rights to the artwork. So yeah, I mean, they could probably send a photo, because some people might not understand JPEG or, PDF. Just say send a photo, and if they send a photo, and then that'll be pretty easy,
That's fine. There is one complication that I guess I'll want to think about, Jim may want to think about. But if you're imagining actually that we're going to get a lot of submissions from the elementary school, which I think would be terrific,
would be.
Those people are probably not of age of majority sufficient to assign their rights. And so we'll have to contemplate how to create an effective assignment. We wouldn't want to accept as a winning logo something that we would be in jeopardy of using.
So maybe they could sign a parental consent form. We could send it to the schools. I'm making it very complicated. I'm sorry.
No,
No, you're not.
there's like I am signing like on behalf of, like there'll be just like a parent guardian thing if
Yes.
they're going to be children. Those as well. And I think the application form could just be like a page 2 of this. The only thing I will mention is with getting a picture, like, will it be high resolution so that it will imprint well on social? So that's the only other thing, like just thinking about like social media stuff. It would be really important that, especially as a logo, that we would potentially place in other forums.
So what we could do too, I don't know how many, excuse me, I don't know how many, submissions we're going to get, but if, Amanda, if you are willing to take this in just the regular email, and again, who knows how many submissions we're really going to get at this point, but if they have an issue, just write back and be like, hey, can we figure out a way to resubmit this so it's not pixelated,
Amanda Wagner, I wanted to just jump in about if the picture quality isn't exactly what we need it to be in order, like high resolution. What if we ended up putting something about how please keep a copy of your original, so that way if we do decide to take a 4-year-old's drawing that they did, wow, sorry, that was a really large accent there. But if we decide to take their drawing, then we can then contact them and work on a way to be able to get their original copy, to be able to take a high resolution photo instead.
And I would add, I think one of the virtues of an assignment of the intellectual property is that we would be able to prepare derivative works, so that if a 4-year-old has a wonderful idea with a nice artistic rendering, but perhaps not the one that we want for our polished logo, we can prepare something that is a little bit more professional and a little bit more social media ready. At least in my view, I would contemplate the possibility that the ultimate logo will be a derivative work of what is submitted.
So can we plan, you, Jim and I plan a meeting soon then, just so we can discuss or maybe I don't even know why I need to be there because I know nothing about what I'm talking about, but like something about intellectual property. So we can start this on February 1st?
Sure.
No problem.
All right. So that's where we are with that right now. Hopefully we can get this all together and put it out there and get it going. I will stop sharing now because I realize I'm still sharing.
Really exciting. Thank you so much, Ashley, for working on that
Yeah.
and putting it together. Great. So continuing on with our agenda, we had started this process of interviewing various stakeholders within the town. And I wanted to see whether or not there were any updates between our previous meeting. There were a few departments that we weren't able to meet with the holidays coming up and schedule and so on. So what I'll do is I'll just go through the list on those that were outstanding and then maybe circle back in the event that someone has touched base with a department they've already spoken to for one reason or another. The first up on the list is the interview with First Selectman Tesoro. Sue, any luck with sorry, would you be able to give the update on it? I was actually a part of that discussion.
Yes, I can. Tara, as she said, was present. Lincoln was present. Myself, Vicki, and Tom McCarthy, the Human Resource Director for the town. And we had a really good conversation with Vicki and with Tom. Vicki explained to us that the first selectman role is actually two parts. One is to manage the town at an operational level, and the other is serving a political role. Vicki has been involved in government for several years through her career, and she has upheld a strong belief that diversity and inclusion is important. At the town level, Trumbull's workforce is made up of union and non-union workers. The departments that the first selectmen oversee include human resources, finance, economic development, public works, and tax collection. During her tenure as first selectman, Vicki has hired 2 new department heads with equal opportunity in mind. There has been a great increase in gender diversity within the town's department leadership during her tenure. Many women are involved now in a department head level than were before. The Civil Services Department is part of the town charter, and they oversee the hiring of all departments with a few exceptions, such as the First Selectman's administrative offices, the Board of Ed, EMS, and nursing departments. It was noted and felt that the hiring practices of the civil service kind of maybe put a damper a little bit on the applicant pool. By the way, the time it gets to the first selectman or to human resources, they're down to, if I remember correctly, I think they said 5 candidates, and they'd like to see that expanded a little, or we were saying it should be expanded a little to maybe be able to promote greater diversity. She said by the time that they get to the final 5 that anybody see, a lot of times there is no diversity there. So there is no choice to be made that way, and they do the best with what they can. They said there were challenges in navigating rules and contracts, and that maybe we could take a step back and figure out some way to create maybe a more equitable system. Tara expressed that it might be helpful for us to understand the current demographics of the town employees, and that she would like to follow up with Tom McCarthy to see what publicly available information she could find. So what I got from most of it, and also Vicki stressed that a lot of the people are volunteers, they're unpaid, and it's just a matter of trying to get people to actually apply or to want to be part of town government. That is a hard part too, that that's very difficult to do, and that keeps the whole area from being more diverse than it already is. And which goes along with that flyer that somebody just put up before about the how to get involved in politics and all that fits right in with this, trying to encourage people of color, people of different religions, races, creeds, sex, whatever, to actually come out and try to volunteer to be a part of town government. And that would be the first step in getting it more diverse. So our conversation with Vicki went very, very well. And she welcomed the opportunity to touch base with us again in the future and for her to stay involved and to support what we're doing. So it was a very positive meeting, I thought.
Great, thank you so much for that update. And I would just echo, in terms of I know data has come up a couple of times within our own interviews and what makes sense for us to be able to gather. So we can, maybe after all of the updates, identify exactly what will be going to the Civil Services or Human Resources Department with, and ask for what sort of data points make sense for us to be able to, more than anything, just baseline where we currently are and track progress. Lincoln, is there anything that you would add?
No, I think you guys have said it all. The thing that was mentioned was with the civil service that Vicki mentioned was that the way in which, the selections are done, it's probably, needs to be updated. It's more antiquated. So there should be possibly an update to the criteria, how the selections are done, how things are put out.
Okay, thank you so much for that update. Board of Education and connecting with Trumbull Public Schools Superintendent Semmel is the next department. I will note that we did have notes that were attached to the agenda.
Yeah, so I was able to connect with Dr. Semmel, and it was on January 7th. We had a really wonderful conversation. I'm trying to read through my notes here so I can kind of summarize for everyone, but I did want to touch upon with him about the Coalition for Social Justice. And he did mention how that is still something, it's one of their goals, and it's listed actually on the Board of Education's site, where it's one of the goals that we're trying to meet for 2021. But just because it's a goal for 2020-21 year, it doesn't mean that it stops there. And that's what he sees it. He sees this as something that is going to continue on for many, many years. But it hasn't started yet because of timing. It was really great to hear a little bit more from the background of what's happening. He ended up sharing that he really wanted to wait to get an assistant superintendent to really kick this off. And with the new hiring of our new assistant superintendent, that's going to get the ball rolling soon. She just started on the 19th, so we're trying to get her feet wet first, and then they're going to start working on that coalition. They did say that the coalition is really going to be starting off as more of a steering committee with subcommittees attached. And each subcommittee is going to focus on different topics within social justice and how it interconnects or intersects with education. And so looking at curriculum, hiring, etc. Dr. Semmel also shared about the importance about bringing in experts for training, because he does believe that training staff is something that definitely needs to happen. And I really appreciated him mentioning about expertise and knowing that he's aware of diversity, equity, inclusion, but he wants people who are actually experts in the field to really educate his staff. And I know he's looking in CERC to be able to come in and do a consultation and work on some training. Another thing that I thought was very important from our conversation is that Dr. Semmel is very aware of how many employees he technically supervises and oversees. He's finding the importance of hiring a true HR director for the Trumbull Public School System as extremely important. He's really looking for somebody, and he's hoping to be able to do this hiring process soonish. because he wants somebody who can be able to properly manage the workforce, but also someone who can help increase the diversity in the hiring process. He did make a point that the staff that he has, there is diversity, but maybe not racially diverse, right? It might not be as visible to everybody, but he is aware that there is diversity amongst staff, but maybe not the way that we're looking to have it a little bit. But he wants to increase it. He did mention too about the curriculum, about some changes that have been made. He mentioned a creation of a course that focuses on Latinx and Black community members, in how like it's an elective course for juniors and seniors in our high school. He also shared about how there's a lot of analysis happening and adjustment to the English curriculum right now, paying close attention to not just what they're reading, but who they're reading from and the different point of views that the students are getting. And then next year, he's hoping that they're going to be able to focus on the K through 5 social studies curriculum, trying to update those texts and include some more inclusive point of views there as well. Dr. Semmel did, those are the notes that I have from our meeting. Dr. Semmel was very open to doing continued meetings together. And so I'm going to be jumping on his schedule, hopefully at the end of February. Maybe I can be able to meet the assistant superintendent as well, so that way we can get that connection going for the coalition. I want to make sure that Dr. Semmel and the public schools, as well as the Board of Education, knows how much they're in support of all their efforts that they're working on. We know there's a lot on their plate right now. And so we're definitely working with them as much as we can. And Edit, I know, is in full support of that coalition. We're going to try to work with them as much as we can. Ashley, did you have a question?
I did. So, again, I don't have children in the school system yet, and yours is 4, so you too. Is there a way for accountability for this? Like, we're saying that we're going to do these things in the school systems and that there are going to be these programs, but is there like a place where they can post this, or maybe we can work with them to put it out there so it happens? Does that sound crazy? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there a place where people can read, like, okay, these are the new programs that are going to be implemented that are really going to happen?
Are you talking about new programs, or are you talking about the coalition?
Well, both, honestly, like, because I know Matt, what is his, Brosniak, I think, was,
yeah,
he mentioned it, and I hadn't seen it anywhere. And I mean, again, I'm not like out in the school community as much, but like, I feel like a lot of people don't know these things. Is there a place where they're going to like give like an update about the things that they're doing to promote diversity and inclusion? Or is it just like, I don't want it to be just talk, is what I'm saying, basically.
Yeah, so Dr. Semmel, in our conversation, he ended up sharing that there's actually a lot of information on the Board of Education website.
Okay.
The problem is whether or not we know how to find it.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing, because even the coalition, I didn't realize that it was actually one of their goals, that like it's set that they need to meet this by the end of the academic year. And that, I think, holds some accountability in a sense that they need to get this going, because it's one of their goals that they need to meet by the end of the year. I don't know what the repercussions are if they don't meet it, right? But
Right.
I didn't ask that question, and that's something that I can definitely follow up on. But
could it be something that we work with them and like we post it on our website and our Facebook page, like, hey, this is what the Trumbull schools are doing, and they'll be like, hey, yay, we're gonna promote
told
it.
them that we would support in any way, shape, or form, and I think that that's definitely something that Edit can do. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of the point of all of these interviews that we're doing.
Right.
Tell them like, we're
Right.
here to support you. And so Dr. Semmel and I, this is my opinion, you can ask Dr. Semmel yourself, but I thought we had a really great conversation, and that I'm comfortable that if he ever emails me and says, hey, Amanda, can you send this to the rest of Edit, or can you post this on your Facebook, spread the word, I will be happy to do that. Just like how if Michelle from, Human Resources or Civil Services ends up emailing me, I'd be happy to do that as well. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that from this, he's also agreed to work with us as much as we can. He had a lot of questions about Edit as well. He wanted to know a little bit more about us. And so I think that that's going to happen, Ashley. I don't know about accountability wise, whether or not we can actually, hold them.
That might be the wrong word. I just want to make sure that it's out there.
But I think having that relationship with them is going to move it along.
Awesome. Thanks. Sorry. Just
your point, Ashley, I mean, I would add, not for tomorrow, right, but as the coalition begins to really become grounded and has members and they start meeting, certainly, I would say a midterm goal would be figuring out what the plan is and being a part of those conversations if we're able to. And also, actively participating in BOE meetings to express, and voice over progress that's being made, because it is true. I mean, there is so much progress that is intended and that's going to happen, but we're sort of falling short on that last mile by not communicating it to the community, to students and teachers and everyone else that has moved to Trumbull because of its amazing schools. So I think we can absolutely set that, and we should continue to follow up on, I don't want to overshadow. I don't think it makes sense to overshadow exactly what you're saying, Amanda. I mean, they have things that are in the works, so let's figure out how we support them in that. But then maybe even like suggest, like, hey, should we put together like a 9-point plan together, like specifically on this, and how can we work together?
Yeah, I think I'm side of like they haven't started the coalition yet, so we can't kind of put anything to a flame until they start, right? Like let them get started, show the support for it, and like let's be a part of that process as much as we can. And I think Dr. Semmel knows that we are totally on board to help with whatever we can, whether it's being there as an extra set of eyes, that 9-point plan that Tara's talking about, anything like that.
I'll just throw this out there. I mean, because schools is such a hot issue, and maybe we will also revisit this later in our agenda when we're discussing the public hearing recap. Perhaps it would make sense to have the new assistant superintendent come and speak to the entire committee at a future edit meeting. So, I don't want to rush the process, but it would be great, at least within the next 3 months, to have either the assistant superintendent or even Dr. Semmel to join us and sort of talk through what the plans are as a group.
I just want to throw out one more thing. This isn't specifically about Board of Education or Trumbull Public Schools, but I also think that when we do hear that there are things happening, it shouldn't just be about like, well, why don't we know about it? It should be more like, how can we help spread that knowledge? Does that make sense? Because I think just like how we were nervous about the public hearing, about like, well, how are people going to know? Well, we didn't throw it up on Instagram. I didn't call anybody, like, but like, so I didn't exhaust all of my resources, but at the same time, we got a decent number of people to participate anyway, right? So I think we need to definitely offer more support and and offer suggestions of how to improve if we can, just like how we would take suggestions as a committee of if anyone has any better ways for us to communicate with the town. But I just want to make sure that we are not just looking at any like negative feedback of what's happening in the town, but also recognizing like, hey, you are making some strides. You are looking to do these changes. Way to go. We're happy for you. Let's figure out how to make sure we're pushing you forward. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Does that close the discussion around the BOE? I know that one, again, is the top. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. Excellent. The next department is the police department. So that is one that I was tasked with, and I had agreed to meet with Chief Lombardo. There's been, a bit of scheduling, shuffling around, but we do have our meeting set for Wednesday, January 27th. So I'll look forward to giving you all an update on our conversation in our February meeting. And it was the same with Tom McCarthy. So I'm meeting with him on the Civil Services Department the evening before. So I'll be meeting with him on January 26th. And I can, again, provide an update to the group in our February session. Did we cover, the next is EMS, the emergency responders. Jonathan, you were kind enough to send over the notes from that, so that is attached to our agenda tonight. Would you please give us a summary on how that conversation went?
I reported on it at our last meeting. I had the discussion with Lee Goodman the day that we met in December.
Oh, that's.
And so I've now provided the notes of that. I won't repeat what I said a month ago or in the notes. I would augment that report consistent with some of the observations that have already been made this evening. that Tom McCarthy has subsequently corresponded with me about the request that I had made in the interview for information about demographics, to say that he would be happy to work with us to supply information. What would we like? And I've let him know that we would be discussing that, I assume, this evening. And frankly, I think it would be great if, when you meet with him on January 26th, you're able to carry with you some form of request for the kind of information we would like, sort of across the board, so that we can coordinate with him one request rather than making piecemeal requests for EMS and others.
It's a great suggestion. So while we're on the topic, I think it's an opportune time to just open the floor up on, the ask is, what specific data, when it comes to the town workforce demographics, or the town as a whole, if that's something that this group thinks we should be looking at. So what I had in mind, just high level, would be aggregate data around the key demographics that we could look at. So that would look at, whether or not ethnicity is available, gender, age, across the various departments that our human resources department could have access to. The BOE, I think in our interview with Vicki Tesoro, Tom McCarthy mentioned that they don't actually oversee the hiring for the BOE, so maybe there are some gaps where we'd have to look to get additional information. Beyond the core demographic data, is there anything else that our committee sees a value in making a request for in order to move our initiatives forward?
Lincoln Johnson. I was going to say, Tara, that when we look at data, one of the things that would be important is to know, if there's a particular, ethnic group that applies, the number of people, if that information is available, the number of people at rounds it would be in each case, but how many even make, the first cut, the second cut, those type of things, how many make it to the finalists.
I do believe that
or to just not having any applicants, especially to like the BOE.
of the equal opportunity laws, I don't believe that they collect demographic information upon application. I believe that's what Tom was because it would be against the law to ask someone sort of like, what is your ethnicity and X, Y, and Z as you're moving through the process for any concerns that they might be discriminated against. And so any sort of that information really, as far as I know, I mean, we could ask about gender maybe, if that would be of interest.
Would we not ask Tom to supply us with whatever available data by department and in aggregate of any demographic nature? So obviously we don't need to know names and social security numbers, but if he's captured the data, whether it's in the application process or only in the intake process, and I suspect you're right, it's only when enrolling the personnel, then if he's captured the data, would he be willing to share it with us and see what he says?
Yeah, I mean, that's one approach to it. If, my only thing was trying to avoid having to churn through large, like humongous and expensive data sets. Because, that would be a huge undertaking to find meaningful correlations and establish a baseline. So I was sort of thinking about it from a process standpoint, like what is the core information that we need, and then what would we do with it? So, we could start from there if someone could volunteer from our group, or if there's someone within town that we could work with, maybe I can ask Tom whether or not there's someone that could actually pull the data and not just send us raw data, but actually, display it and analyze it in a meaningful way.
Well, maybe we should begin by asking him what data he captures. It may be that the data is not as complex as you think it is. Although I will say, without throwing him under the bus, that given that Excel document that he put together last time, I'm quite sure Dan is up to this.
All right, so I can start there. I can start making the ask when I meet with Tom McCarthy on Tuesday evening, just to see, A, what data is available, and B, would he have the resource available in order to help us with an analysis on core demographic across the workforce, and maybe also understand what gaps there might be. So if there are specific departments that aren't reflected there, and then we can follow up with those areas separately. Does that sound like a good plan, everyone?
That certainly could be a drop down on the overall spreadsheet to capture those data points for reference, future reference.
Tara, I was also thinking, what about interviews with actual, employees that we see, within the different departments of the town, to get a perspective of, things that, as far as, maybe how long, since they've been serving in that particular capacity, and how the, how, as far as how do they view their contribution maybe to the department, and what feelings do they get from being there. Why would someone be interested in serving in that capacity, let's say from a minority group or something like that. Some qualitative data.
If I'm hearing what you're saying, maybe it's sort of, in what ways does our town and our hiring process incentivize or create a welcoming space for diverse applicants? Is that sort of what the end would be to the question that you're asking? To understand how we're currently fostering a welcoming and
Yeah, because I think when you make up these individuals, instead of just going from the managerial standpoint, just the actual individuals that are there working, what are the perceptions, what has the experience been like? A little qualitative data.
So that's interesting. I'm sort of, yes, Amanda.
I think what I'm understanding from Lincoln is that he's saying that, like, all right, now after we've done like the managerial interviews, maybe it's worthwhile to like tap into some of the employees to find out what they're experiencing on the ground level, because sometimes there is a disconnect versus what the supervisor might be experiencing versus what the employees might be experiencing. So that's actually an interesting take that I haven't actually thought about until you brought that up. And that might be something worthwhile discussing maybe in the future, after we've started setting up these relationships with departments, and the departments realize that we're here to support them and not to burn any bridges. Maybe then we can talk to them and be like, hey, we really love to like have a conversation with your department. And maybe once we're like in person and
down the road,
like, hey, this is a safe space to talk about things maybe that you notice that you haven't been able to tell your supervisor yet, that you'd like some support on, and we can be able to figure out ways that we can support you in articulating those to your department or something.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking, that's exactly, Amanda, I was just trying to think of, because we're at the moment working with department heads to establish relationships more than anything and let them know that we're here to support them. So as they have diversity goals, I wonder, you know, how we continue in that spirit of collaboration with those department heads. So not like we're fishing for, you know, I just don't want to come across like we're trying to fish for something that's going awry when as the leaders that we're speaking with, you know, they're expressing that, you know, these are sort of the goals that we have. So I just want to be careful that we are going about it in the right way and in a way that really is in the interest for both the workforce as well as the leaders that are leading it, right? So how can they, you know, I don't know if they're part of the conversation, but certainly, Lincoln, I mean, it's interesting, and I think we should explore it once we're a bit more grounded.
Yeah, down the road, definitely.
Melissa?
I like that idea a lot, and I'm just thinking, this is what I do for a living, but I work on surveys. So I think we had talked about this early on. Logistically, I'm not exactly sure how it would work, but if we could do some kind of anonymous survey where we're actually reaching out to all Trumbull employees or something like that, we can ask them to volunteer their ethnicity and their gender and all that, so that we can analyze things. We can ask them how comfortable they feel or if there's any issues, whatever. And that will give us all kinds of data that we can go after.
That is actually great because that would allow us to capture both community sentiment and workforce. We could work together with the Human Resources Department, Tom McCarthy, and see whether or not they would be open to helping to circulate something like that we could look at. That's a great idea. Okay, so another thing to just ask, and maybe they have something like that. Maybe they've, and that's actually maybe the first question is, have you already circulated any sort of surveys that you have, not just on the demographic data, but is there any data in terms of, you know, workforce? I'm not even sure where to start, but just, you know, anything as it relates to EDI goals. Okay, perfect. Planning and zoning is the next department that I have on my list.
Okay, I can, you don't have my actual interview notes in front of you guys because I have not had time to compile them. What I can say briefly is that planning and zoning as a department, they get a request. Is it something they handle? Is it something they don't? If it's something they handle, does it fall under a category that would be seen as, well, we're calling diversity, but you know, like ADA is a great example of that. And then they make sure that physically, whatever property is being looked at is fully compliant with ADA or whatever other regulations. So from their point of view, you know, they're kind of locked into all the regulations and compliance, if not exceeding compliance with state and federal regulations. So that would be the summation of the planning and zoning, and it seems like they're really well run, I would say.
That's great. Thanks so much. And no worries, we can attach the notes to our next agenda even, or if you want to give a more comprehensive update in February, that's totally fine.
Whatever
I think so. Okay, there was a question on, we had another department, or which it's the same individual. I believe it's Robert Labranzi, if I get his name wrong.
Yep.
I apologize. I'm saying I had not. Who is also our designated ADA compliance coordinator within town. Melissa, I think.
I have a note out to him, but he hasn't responded yet, so I'll give him a while and try again and see if we can connect.
Well, maybe I can, I mean, I am talking to him. So if there's anything I can do to, whatever the question was, if there's something that he already answered, I'd be glad to share it with you. And
Okay.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to streamline it, right? Since Dan, since you've been able to already connect with Robert, I think the open question is really beyond planning and zoning when it comes to other ADA services in town. What are they, and how can we, like, for example, with some of the meetings that are conducted, I know other towns have the ability, for accessibility, if you have a need for some sort of, services, if it's lack of hearing or seeing, you can still participate publicly. That's just one very specific example, but I think it's just a question as to, beyond planning and zoning, what other initiatives or efforts are currently ongoing with regard to our ADA compliance.
right. Well, maybe that's a good specific question for him, for Roberto. I think what was stressed to me was that when something is brought before them, they then address it to the letter of either the law or the intent or the regulation. And perhaps some of the questions in town might be older properties, because they deal very specifically with physical stuff. So if something doesn't fall under a regulation, and this is just me talking, it might not fit exactly into what they do unless a new plan is put forward. So anyway, I think it's, if you want to share whatever you've gotten with me, and then we can perhaps revisit specific questions with planning and zoning if there's something that I'm not getting across.
Okay, that's super clear. Thanks, Dan, for taking that on and having that follow up with Robert. I'm sorry, did you say his name is Roberto?
Well, it is Robert, but I believe that I believe it's actually both. I've seen it as both. So.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't mispronouncing.
I think you're safe with Robert.
Okay. Thank you. Great. So are there any other updates for departments that I haven't covered? Yes, Jonathan?
I'll just report back. When we last spoke before the holidays, I was asked to reach out to Carl Massaro again as the minority leader on the town council in the new year to see if he might be more accessible. And I did reach out to him several days ago, again by email, and have not received a response again.
Thank you so much for continuing to reach out. I think at this point, I mean, to continue would not make sense. So I think we can leave it as that. I know you've reached out a number of times to try and connect with Mr. Massaro. So unless, there's another opportunity, I would say we're fine to leave it as is. If there's no other updates for any of the other departments, I do want to propose whether we want to establish an additional stakeholder interview with the Trumbull Historical Society.
It's a great idea.
I think in light of the comment we received at the beginning, that would be a good idea.
I agree. I think it's a great idea.
So considering my luck with being able to land my stakeholder interviews, I wonder, is there anyone who might volunteer or who already is familiar with the Trumbull Historical Society and could carry that discussion forward?
I'll do it. I'm not familiar, but I'm interested, and I will definitely reach out. I think that sounds like a great idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley.
And I'm just going to state this for the record. and I'm not going to get in the way of actually doing this. I was a history major.
Jonathan, you can totally take it. Or wait,
No.
yeah, you can totally
I'm not.
take it.
Nope. I am not taking it. I am not taking it, but I will.
You can do it together.
If you need assistance, I will be glad to give you any help you'd like.
Dan will review your notes.
That's right.
As
I'm
he
sorry.
can, because they probably need it. It's okay.
Historians have a different way of looking at things. Like anyone, like mathematicians and lawyers and social scientists and everyone. So.
Well, I think just to add on to this really quick, because I don't want to make this go on forever, but with the comment that Christine, I believe, right, talked about at the beginning, Christine L. Eris, I believe, we're coming up on Black History Month, and she brought up this person that's in our community, and maybe we could put some focus on this. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea or whatever, but it's something that's local to us, and I am new to the community. I didn't know, and I would love to know more. So it's something that maybe we could highlight and work with the Historical Society and putting on, our social media pages and such.
I think that's a great idea.
Ashley, what I can do is that I'll email Christine back. I planned on emailing the two folks that emailed us anyway to let them know thank you for your opinion. We shared it tonight at tonight's meeting. I'm going to get back to them tonight. I'll email her and let her know that she's a former board of the Trumbull Historical Society, so she might know some folks.
Right.
What I can do is I'll reach out to her, give her your contact information, and let her know to reach out to you with somebody to chat with.
Great.
Unless Bill corrects me, I think Christine is still a participant in our meeting, and we might be able to simply talk to her.
Huh.
You gotta love technology. And it could be even an open question on what do they have planned, if they have something planned. I see Christine.
Yeah.
I see Christine joining.
You're muted.
I'm not sure she knows she's here.
Christine, welcome to the meeting.
Maybe we'll stick to email.
But Amanda, that sounds great. So yeah.
That's awesome. Perfect. I do have an update. An additional stakeholder, if you will, that we had on our list was the Westport team chairperson, Harold Bailey Jr. So I do have an update that Mr. Bailey has agreed to join us during our February 18th meeting. It'll be an opportunity for him to share the work that the Westport Team Committee has been doing for the last 2 decades or so, and shed some light on where they've seen progress, or how they got started and really have been able to move the needle within their town initiatives and so on. An ask that I have is I wanted to ensure that his time would be well served for the committee members here, and so if there are a couple of questions that you would like to hear from Harold on directly, could you just email those to me? And what I'll do is I'll collect them and circulate a condensed, basically collate all of the questions and send them over to Mr. Bailey, as well as to you, so you know what to expect on the following agenda. So if everyone doesn't mind just taking that as a to-do, I mean, it's fine if you don't have any questions and you just want to listen to what he has to say, but I thought it would be, if there are specific things that you'd like to hear from him about, to send those my way, and I can share them back with him. But I'm really excited. They've got an awesome program on for Black History Month, for example, but there's just so much that they've done within the community of Westport to really increase not just specific EDI initiatives within the town, but also just the communication and the openness and receptiveness among community members. So I think there's a lot there. Oh, Ashley. Yes, Amanda?
I sort of forgot to mention this in the communications, but I can't remember if it was mentioned in public comment or not, the public hearing previously, but I think another option to kind of reach out to maybe another stakeholder is something that Scott ended up reaching out to us about via email, and I can't remember if he brought it up in public comment or not, but Trumbull's Prevention Partnership. I'm really interested to learn a little bit more about like the healthy living, and they talk a little bit about ways to be able to kind of support Trumbull. And I think it'd be really great to connect with some folks there. And so he ended up giving me a contact person, and I would love to be able to take the initiative of talking with them a little bit more about maybe the way that they see the town and how they have a very different interaction with certain folks. And I don't mind doing that and bringing that to our next meeting.
That would be great. There's also a training that I believe they hosted for the PTSA on implicit bias, which I thought could be interesting for our group as well. So if you would be able to connect and then report back by February, that would be awesome.
I'd be happy to.
Tara?
Yes, Jonathan?
If I may, I just noticed that in our chat, there is a comment in two pieces from Joanne Glasser-Orenstein that is at the intersection of what Dan has been doing and what Ashley has agreed to do. It says, just an FYI, the Hawley House is before the Zoning Commission to be redone as a multifamily dwelling. So I guess that relates to both what the Planning and Zoning Group is doing and our town history.
That's great. Thank you to the...
Wow, that's not.
It would be interesting to understand more about what the plans might be as a multifamily dwelling and whether or not there's anything happening within the development process that are actually going to advance. Yes, Melissa?
Tara, this was the person that's proposing that had actually reached out to ask for our potential help of some sort. So I've been back and forth with him a couple of times. I don't have a clear understanding of exactly what he would like from us. So that's my latest question out to him that I haven't heard back on. So we do have some sense of some of the plans that they put in place and things. So we'll see. I'm not exactly sure what we can do and how that might fit together.
Okay, maybe we could forward that to our edit email inbox, and then a reply could be, if it's a developer, I think, could come and speak during the next public meeting on February 18th during public comment and share.
Are they? Did it seem like they were asking for like a acknowledgement of the historical importance of the house, like in like a plaque on the house, something like that?
There is some talk of some sort of memorial with a bridge, I think, that they're proposing, that the town the community members could go and visit. So there's some of that, but I'm not sure exactly what the plans are for the house itself and all of that. So I think that he was looking to get our help in his quest in front of the P&Z. But I don't know exactly. So I don't want to speak for him, but I think that's a great idea to have him invited.
I do. The same member of our community is providing a bit more insight here. She says, or I don't mean to assume pronouns, Joanne Glasser states that they had planned a statue and a bridge at the Hawley House. So maybe also a question to the Historical Society, is the Hawley House currently a historical landmark? Maybe that's a place to start, but also inviting the developer to come at a future meeting. We can understand a bit more what what the ask is of support, and potentially also share some of the comments that we heard tonight from Christina Aris around how is the current development plans, how are those plans honoring the legacy of Nero Hawley, and in what ways could we look to that property to provide more opportunities for the community to get to know life and celebrate the accomplishments he had.
It certainly seems like a good thing to pursue.
Yes. Jim Cordone?
Yeah, Tara, just to clarify, I represent the Planning and Zoning Commission as well. That project is not officially before the commission at this time. They submitted a pre-application to present the idea. So there's not anything currently pending before the commission. So it's still in the realm of possibilities at the moment.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
That's helpful. I mean, I think, at this point, I just don't know enough about, I don't think, all of us know enough about it in order to know how we can support. And so it would be great to have the developer join, or potentially, Dan, in your conversations with planning. And so, although I feel like, going through the developer might be the most direct way to understand what the intention and the vision is.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Start there.
Excellent. Okay. I know it's a really late night and you guys are all powering through this agenda. We have just 3 more items on the agenda, and the next one is on programming ideas, which is tangentially also, from Melissa, from your conversations with the library. I've included on the back page, on page 19 of our agenda, just a list. It's non-exhaustive, I will say. There are a lot of cultural identity and heritage awareness dates and months throughout the year, but that was, I put together just a starting place for us to all become familiar with the different celebrations that we could potentially look to either, acknowledge or celebrate, and do like a social media post around, or potentially more programming. So I can turn it over to you, Melissa, if that's okay, and you can give a quick update on the conversation with the library.
Sure, sounds good. So I met with the programming team, and they are super excited, as was I, to collaborate moving forward. We talked about, is there anything that we could do to help with Black History Month? Is there anything we could get involved in? Unfortunately, they're kind of shorthanded. One of them's going out on, I think, on a leave for a few weeks. So they're not really prepared to kind of kick off anything new at this point. But definitely when as things move forward, they want to get some things going with us. We know that they currently host a nonfiction book group that has been fairly successful. It got interrupted a bit by COVID, so they lost some members since it's no longer in person. One of the things that they mentioned was that it's based on the way it's scheduled in the middle of the day, that it tends to attract more seniors than so they'd like to expand the audience in the future and make that a little broader for more members of the community. So that's where we thought that we could come in and try to help bring that, kind of evolve that. So we talked through the idea of an edit sponsored book club or discussion group or something like that. It made sense based on what we heard last week in the public forum. It made sense with what they thought would be a good idea and well received by their patrons. So we were thinking maybe some kind of summer series, which will give us enough time to plan for things, and then have that to kind of fill in around the things that they're already doing. So we'll talk more about that. We also talked about maybe some kind of bi-monthly group where members of our task force actually could help moderate or lead those conversations. So that's something we can consider. As far as getting good press, kind of in both directions, it's a good symbiotic relationship in that, so if we can come up with either the discussion groups and the book club, or even just suggestions for certain books that we think would be great to highlight, they suggested they could even create stickers that say editor's choice or something like that, so that when people come into the library, they're assuming that happens again soon, that we can go in and browse, that they'll be able to actually see that, and that will help get us out there a little more as well. Let's see. So speaker presentations, they thought there's a lot more room for inviting people in than they're currently doing. So we talked about seeing who might make sense there. We need to do a little more digging on that. But beyond just, more famous people or well-known people, they also liked the idea of maybe promoting local social justice activists and giving them a platform to speak, which I thought was really interesting. And so since, we're in this age of Zoom, it's certainly all these speaker engagements are a lot easier to facilitate. So they're actually working on some names, pulling some names together for that. And they absolutely offered up that we can leverage their lists and their both email and the social media and things like that. They're happy to promote things that we're doing and give us access to their people. They also suggested maybe even actually giving an introduction to us, to the task force, and maybe sharing, who we are and putting kind of faces to the names and things like that. Oh, and then the last thing that we talked about was there's a lot of library programming happening around the country that with Zoom and all that, there's access to everything. People can sign on to a Cambridge, Mass library and a Greenwich library and anywhere, all over the country. So we have really good access to all kinds of different programming topics. So I want to try to kind of look into that and see, what could make sense for us to just suggest to people that, hey, this is happening, or perhaps try to make something of our own based on something similar. And then the one other thing, I wasn't aware of this, but Bigelow Tea evidently has a senior center in Fairfield that they do educational opportunities and things like that. So so they suggested I scope that out and see, because there's some interesting things that happen there as well. So we might be able to get involved somehow with that. And I think
it's a lot of there for sure. What I'll do is I'll quickly just share the agenda, flipping over to this calendar, if everyone can see my screen. For those following on audio or are not able to see the share, it is again page 19 of the agenda. I wonder if we challenge ourselves to look at one of the identity and heritage months, and maybe we start in April for, which I had never heard about, Celebrate Diversity Month, but I read about it. It's a national month that is started several years ago in 2004. But I wonder if we sort of set a goal for ourselves to at least have one programming opportunity in the coming months. For the month of February, and I would say for Women's History Month, there are a few other celebrations and awareness acknowledgements in the month of March. Potentially, having social media posts around that might be, maybe for Women's History, it's looking at our town specifically, and maybe it's actually looking into what the Trumbull Historical Society has in terms of women in Trumbull, And that's something we could easily do by looking at their website and promoting. But I don't know if that seems far-fetched or too forced for the committee. I'm interested to hear from other members in terms of, it doesn't have to be April. If there's something, another date that would give us at least, you know, 8 weeks to plan something out via Zoom, and interested to hear what you all think.
I actually think that starting in April would be a great idea because it's like, you know, the Celebrating Diversity Month, and we are about all identities. We're not just about a specific type. So I think that that'd be a really great idea to kind of like start us off with programming, and it gives us enough time to develop something on our own. But I think in the meantime, February, we are doing technically a program in the sense of a logo contest. And in March, we can definitely support the Trumbull Society if there's any history that they can share with us, where we could create some kind of visual that we can post on our account and share it in our meeting and highlight it. But then actually do maybe, whether it's a speaker or maybe partnering with the library to do an event in April, whether it's virtual or not. I think that would be a really great idea.
So Ashley, could you just probe that with the Trumbull Historical Society in your conversation, just on programming in general, but then for specific historical awareness months, whether there is anything planned or whether we can work together to create something together?
Sure.
Any other thoughts or comments for programming?
I agree with both you and Amanda that Diversity Month is a particularly apt month for this group to attempt to do something that will be public facing.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other comments?
I think that makes sense.
Okay, so we'll use April as a date to keep us going here, and it's always helpful. I don't know if anyone else is the same, but I'm very deadline driven. So unless I have an actual date to work towards, it's sort of in this perpetual influx of like almost getting done. So I think that'll be great for us to have a date to really work towards. And in February, we can have a few ideas put together. Maybe we'll know more by then on how the Trumbull Historical Society, if that's an option, and maybe have another conversation with the library in terms of if we're shooting for April, what that might look like. Okay, excellent. So let's move to the public hearing that we had last week. Hopefully there are the minutes in case anyone is looking to get a refresh. I did go through the comments that we received, and I also took my own notes. And I think it would be great to begin to think about the themes within the comments we received. So we've touched on some of them so far. One on programming, and I think we've discussed how, what avenues we'll be exploring in order to create a safe space for members to learn, to grow from one another. Comments we received were around, discussion groups, book groups, a listening tour. And so I think some of those initiatives or suggestions from the community will come to fruition through our programming that we're exploring with the various organizations within town. On the strategic side of things, schools is a big one, right? I think that was raised a number of times by community members, and so I think we have already chatted a bit about the BOE and the conversations that are coming forth with Dr. Semmel and the new assistant superintendent. Are there besides those specific follow-ups that we're conducting with the Trumbull public school system and the upcoming Coalition for Social Justice. Does anyone have any ideas on what else we should be doing other than those actions that we've already talked about in order to move EDI goals forward within the schools? Amanda.
One of the things that I think came from the public hearing a lot was also about representation amongst the staff. And I know that I mentioned that Dr. Semmel, I didn't mention this in the public comment because I really wanted them all in the public hearing just to get their opinions out. So I'm glad I was able to report today on what he ended up sharing. And I know that he is working diligently to be able to get that HR director to kind of work on the diversity of their staff. But I think that it'd be really great that if, whether it's me still being the liaison or whoever's the liaison to keep talking with Trumbull Public Schools, is to maybe create like a data, like maybe a foundation of the data of like what currently exists and what does diversity look like amongst staff now. And that way we can help Dr. Semmel kind of showcase how he moves and how he makes the diversity better amongst his staff through this hiring process, right? So we can see the change, and we have some quantitative data that shows that by hiring this HR director and by these initiatives that you're doing to diversify the staff, maybe let's say, for instance, right now there's only 3 people of color, right, on the staff, but then in a year you're now up to 7, or right? So you're seeing the growth and we're measuring it. I think that would be a really great thing to kind of follow up on, to kind of appease the public comment that we're hearing about the representation.
You cut out a little bit at the end there, but I think, yeah, Jonathan, please. I don't want to interrupt.
I need to foreclose the conversation you were having with Amanda, but if you're done, I was going to suggest that I think that it would be a good idea for us to also delegate somebody on our task force to remain in touch with Matt Braxick or somebody who is working with him to get a sense of the kinds of issues and concerns that are coming up from the grassroots, if you will, and how those are being pushed forward.
That's a great point. And I will mention that Matt Brassick does have an official title as the teacher representative for the Trumbull Public Schools. And yes, Amanda?
I was just going to say, I actually met with him this weekend. I didn't know if we would consider him like a stakeholder interview per se, but I did meet with him, talk to him a little bit more about his public comment. He reached out to me knowing that I was talking with Dr. Semmel, and he had some questions and brought up some insights about what students were experiencing in the education, in their education, particularly in the high school, because that's what the key is. So I can be that person if that's what we're looking to do. If we're looking to have somebody connect more frequently, I have no problem continuing that conversation.
Okay, you were cutting in and out a lot, so I'm just going to quickly summarize it. You've been in contact with Matt already, and you're going to move forward with being that liaison for our committee and Matt. Yeah, and I would add another dimension to that. I mean, if everyone is supportive, of course. Lincoln, just to your point, I'm thinking more about all the stakeholders, right? And so teachers are absolutely a key stakeholder, the leadership at the leadership level. I mean, arguably parents and the students themselves are another type of stakeholder, but we have a wonderful PTA group within our town across the schools, and I know through work that I'm currently doing with, they're currently called the PTSA Council, that sort of acts as the umbrella across all of the individual PTAs, that could be another, stakeholder group that we connect with, because from a district level, that might look very different from an individual school level in terms of what we're seeing, or what the sentiments are when it comes to our mission. Yeah, Ashley?
So I thought about this last week with Jonathan's daughter. I think that we should really tap into the students too, because she was very well spoken and said some really important things I think that we're not maybe speaking about as a group as much as how the younger part of the community feels. And I think that we should maybe have a delegate, or if that group, comes together more cohesively, we should really bring them into the conversation as well. Because she was great, and I think what she said was important.
Thank you.
No one's going to argue with that. I mean, that's like, yes, Amanda.
I would just say that I know that Matt is also working with someone else at the high school to create, I hope my audio is working. I'm so sorry. But he's working to create a student group that is about diversity and inclusion, about social justice, that's very student oriented. And I told him that we would be happy to help highlight any activities they're running, any like events that they're hosting. We would help to spread the word about those things, as well as telling him to encourage his students to participate in our public hearings, vice versa, to help each other out.
That's great. I can take it as an action item. I'm involved with the PTA on a number of levels, and so I can begin connecting with the president and the president-elect of the PTSA and understand what forms. I understand that they also do have students that are part of that. They have like a student advocate, if you will, for some of the schools that are a part of that. So that might be a good way, sort of like tell a friend, like, as they're joining these meetings with edit, and get the word out through peer exchange. Okay, excellent. I'm just reading through my notes from the public hearing. There were some great comments around beyond the schools. And sorry, I don't want to cut anyone off too, by just sort of like running through the agenda. Are there any other comments with regards to the schools and other things that we should be doing? Okay. All right then. So we also received a comment around supporting small business owners, and especially, I would think, especially those that are owned by women or minorities, but in general, just, the ability to have more accessibility when it comes to local and supporting our community in that way. I believe, Dan, you are in conversations, and maybe you could share an update with us then in February with the Economic Development Department.
I'd be glad to. And there are, just so we understand the framework, there are government mandates, specifically state mandates on the, it's essentially a percentage of the businesses should be, it's a goal more of, it's not a regulation, it's a goal that should be minority owned or woman owned, 51% at least. And then I think that if we carve out 5 minutes in next month's discussion, we did talk about that with Rena, the head of economic development in Trumbull, who is actively looking to promote both minority ownership in the town, as well as small business ownership in general. And she had some interesting points, which I'll share, which are really, it comes down to geography of the town itself and how we're, how our currently we're laid out. So there's a lot of interesting things there, and I'll be glad to share that in February. And I don't think it's a bad idea to have Rena as a guest in the next public forum to speak about this kind of thing, because I don't think it's really well, I don't want to know if communicated is the right word. It's just not well known what they have to go through to try to promote any kind of business in Trumbull because we're a suburb. We're not a city, and so it's different. But yes, I would like to share that in February if that's okay.
That would be great. Yes, Jonathan?
On the subject of small business, although I don't mean to minimize the importance of minority-owned and women-owned, I think that we ought to think more comprehensively about business in Trumbull and recognize that all businesses also may be employers of diverse members of the population. And we want to support those efforts to support diversity. And as well, many of those businesses may be interested in supporting our mission. And so, for example, when we're looking for sponsorship for an art competition or whatever it may be, reaching out to business in Trumbull may be a way to try to do that. And so I think that business outreach is a useful and important part of our mission as well, and in a more comprehensive way than simply ownership.
If it's okay to chime in here, John, I think you're exactly right, and I think that's what Rena stressed, that they are working to number one, promote all small businesses, but also to spread that kind of idea that you're talking about, so it's just becomes part of the culture, and I think so. What you're saying is being done, and I think what I was trying to say is that there might be some challenges there, and just to express that. That's all.
But that sounds great for you to come back in February with an update, and we can talk through ideas on how we can support in the interim. If there is a list, for example, of small businesses that we can either work towards having like a mini interview series or something, or get to know the business owner, and bring a little bit more connectivity, right, in our town, because it is a culture thing. We're a suburb, but we're this small town, but it's not that small. Sometimes it doesn't feel that small because there isn't always the opportunity, especially nowadays with COVID, forget it, like to really be able to connect with one another, which is so important for experience sharing and really learning about your neighbors and just being together. I'd be remiss not to also mention, on the affinity groups and the fact that that was so amazing to have the founder of the Black Moms of Trumbull group, who did share with us the importance and the strength that she's had for the affinity group. I think, I'll open it up and see what comments others might have.
So Amanda Wagner, I also appreciated when she shared that, because I think that affinity groups, when you're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, is important for folks that have similar identities to connect and to share things. Like, for instance, I'm in the Trumbull Moms group, right? One of my identities is being a mom. And like, I would really appreciate connecting with other moms to find out, like, is anyone else having an issue with their 4-year-old going to bed? Like, I know that that's not an identity specifically regarding like diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, but it's just something that's relatable. And I'm a Latina woman, and so if I'm trying to find a new doctor in the area, I want to make sure that they're being inclusive of being Latina, right? If I'm on the phone talking to my mom in a different language, is there going to be any kind of repercussion or a different type of way that they're going to be handling whatever it may be, right? So I think that it was really awesome that she ended up sharing that. But from a perspective of where we are in edit, I think that our role really needs to be in supporting affinity groups, sharing their message and sharing their access and increasing their access to the folks. But I don't know if I would be in support of starting affinity groups, because I just don't know if we have the means to do that right now. We should really focus on creating a foundation and then letting other key players in our town, or not really key players, but anyone in our community to start one and encouraging them to get involved in that way, I think would be the best place for us.
Jonathan?
So from my perspective, I guess I view the way I'd like us to function to be as a megaphone and not as a prism. And so I would prefer for us not to be trying to build individual affinity groups, but instead I would welcome affinity groups to come talk to us individually. And I could imagine that we could have a standing slot on our agenda, 5 minutes at each meeting for a different affinity group to come talk to us. And we could get the perspective that they're willing to share firsthand, and make decisions about how we can best try to facilitate their concerns or address their concerns. So I mean, I think some effort to identify existing affinity groups and invite them to liaise with us would be great.
It's a great suggestion, Jonathan. So as we learn more about other affinity groups, or maybe it's also, if you're out in the community and you're thinking about starting one or not sure how to get started, we would love to support you or maybe connect you with others in the community that have gone along a similar journey. Great. Any other comments with regards to affinity groups within town or what we can do to support? Okay. Great. So we will have, again, the Westport team chairperson speaking. I know that there was a question on the suggestion box, which I think is a fantastic idea. We could wait until we have Mr. Harold Bailey speak about how that particular piece functions within their committee. They have something that's a little bit more, of a formal anonymous reporting. And I think it could make sense to understand how that operates and then maybe have a brainstorm together on whether doing something similar or maybe going in a different direction for our town makes sense. Okay, great. Is there anything else on the public hearing that anyone would like to discuss? Okay, great. So I've included a line item in the agenda for new business, and we wouldn't necessarily resolve anything during this. It just more is a way to tee up our following agenda. Does any member have any new business to raise tonight? Amanda?
Hey, Tara. I think one of the things that we should probably touch upon next month, because I know we had a full agenda tonight, is talking a little bit more about trainings. I know in December, I think we briefly brought it up, but I think that whether we all are taking some time over the next month to kind of do a little bit of research on our own on maybe some trainings that are either free or low cost or anything like that that's regarding like diversity, equity, inclusion. I think that would be really great. And I'm talking about trainings for this particular group, not necessarily us conducting.
That's great. Yeah, and what we can do is I've received a few suggestions on potential trainings. I mentioned the one through the CPA UD. Also, I think, so there's a number of options that we could have. Would everyone be supportive of taking a training? Obviously, I'm not just going to throw you into the fire. We'll talk about what type of trainings these are. But in general, I mean, I think it is an important initiative that you're raising in order to level set our experience. Also, just, ensuring that we're all rising and setting at the same time, to put it in terms of a metaphor, when it comes to our own understanding of what it means to be equitable, diverse, and inclusive within our town.
Very much so.
Excellent. Is there any other new business that anyone would like to raise? Okay. Great. So this brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. Thank you all for, again, I mean, I know these are long evenings. Everyone has jobs at the beginning and kids that are running around birthday parties, baking unicorn cakes. But our next regular meeting will take place on Thursday, February 18th at 7:30 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Thank you. Sorry, who seconded?
Trop.
Oh, that was so quick, I missed it. Okay. Great. So, assuming that no one objects to adjourning our meeting tonight.
No.
Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.